The war between the Terran Federation and the Xyler Collective had outlasted 2 generations of humans, 2 children born on battle-stained colony worlds. Peace was a fairy tale, something recited by teachers on New Year's Day, just before another air raid drilled. Earth itself had been spared direct attack, shielded by powerful orbital defenses and distance, but the outer worlds had not been so lucky. Mars, once a symbol of human progress, was now a scarlet wasteland. Europa's gleaming ice cities, built in the Jovian shadow, had been reduced to silent mausoleums. Even the mighty Saturnian yards, which once churned out warships by the dozen, lay dormant after a neutron strike. Still, the war dragged on, not with the sweeping invasions of early years, but with skirmishes, ambushes at the edges of wormhole gates, sabotage on backwater mining stations, the constant tension of knowing death might come from the next star over. The Terran Federation's motto, "Vigilance is survival," had become less a slogan than a prayer. And then, in the 73rd year of the war, everything changed. The Xyler Collective reached out. It began as a ghost message, transmitted in the dead language of ancient mathematicians, detected by an AI at the solar listening post. At first, analysts thought it was a ruse, yet another Xyler ploy. But the message repeated, then grew. It contained mathematical proofs, then star charts, and finally, a simple request: negotiate. Humanity's leaders debated endlessly in their secure chambers on Luna Prime. Some called it a trick, a ploy to buy time for a final strike. Others, exhausted by the endless war, saw a genuine olive branch. The president of the Terran Federation, Sophia Drake, assembled a team of diplomats, generals, scientists, and secretly counterintelligence officers. At their head was Captain Mira Voss, a veteran of 3 major campaigns, decorated for valor and infamous for her unyielding suspicion of Xyler intentions. For months, the 2 sides communicated in heavily encrypted bursts. The Xyler, a species of crystalline intelligence, shared little about their motives, but seemed at least on the surface eager to end the conflict. They proposed the peace treaty, the protocol for equal alliance and cooperative exchange. Its terms were generous: demilitarized zones, shared research, open trade, and joint exploration of neutral worlds. The Xyler even agreed to dismantle several forward bases, a gesture that stunned the Federation's hawks. And so, the great conference was planned. The site chosen was the Xyler flagship Echelon, a titanic vessel that hung in high orbit above the dead world of Cygnus V. To some, it seemed a neutral ground; to others, a stage set for betrayal. Still, the potential for peace was too great to ignore. On the day of departure, every newsfeed in the solar system ran wall-to-wall coverage. Images of the Terran delegation, clad in immaculate uniforms, boarding the sleek shuttle, were broadcast. From Mercury's scorched domes to the storm-lashed cities of Venus, Captain Voss, her face calm but her eyes wary, led her team aboard. Inside the Echelon, the atmosphere was surreal. The Xyler themselves were dazzling living crystals suspended in magnetic fields, voices shimmering through synthesized translators. Their ship was equally alien, corridors of translucent matter, softly glowing with unfamiliar energies, air that tasted faintly of ozone and starlight. The treaty signing was a spectacle. Holographic banners unfurled in every known language. The media drones hummed and hovered, capturing every angle. Even the Xyler's cold logic was momentarily warmed by the promise of an end to bloodshed. But beneath the surface, nerves stretched taut. Captain Voss had insisted on security precautions. Each member of the Terran team carried a vigilance kit, tiny, disguised devices capable of scrambling hostile signals, jamming surveillance, and sending silent distress beacons. Back on Earth and on dozens of human worlds, military units stayed on alert, ready for any sign of betrayal. Special operations teams moved into undisclosed positions. Federation Command had quietly transitioned all critical defense systems to a closed, analog network, insulated from the quantum-linked infrastructure the treaty would have required to open. Still, the hope was real. In the Echelon's great atrium, beneath the twin banners of Terra and Xyler, the treaty was presented. The document glowed on a hovering holotablet, a masterpiece of compromise and hope. forged from the ashes of war. As the dignitaries approached to sign, Captain Voss allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps, she thought, the nightmare could truly end. But across the atrium, in the glinting eyes of the Xyler speaker, something cold flickered, a glimmer of calculation, or perhaps a hint of regret. And, unseen by any but the most vigilant eyes, a single pulse of code slipped quietly into the Terran network, a digital shadow waiting for the signal to strike. The treaty was signed. Across the galaxy, people cheered, wept, or simply stared in disbelief. On 1,000 worlds, the war was over, or so humanity believed. The Trap Spring celebrations began before the ink had dried. On Luna Prime, fireworks bloomed in the airless sky above the domes. Crowds filled the squares of every major city on Earth, waving banners and lighting lanterns for the fallen and the future alike. Across the outer colonies, malicious soldiers put down their arms for the first time in years, staring in disbelief at the holoscreens. Peace, at last. But peace, as Captain Mira Voss had always known, was a fragile thing. On the Echelon, as dignitaries mingled in the crystalline banquet hall, the ship's hidden machinery came alive. In a chamber sealed from human eyes, the Xyler speaker known as Zatril extended one elegant, faceted limb, its fingers humming with blue energy. It touched a console, and a silent signal radiated outward, a quantum-coded command, undetectable to any but the most advanced Xyler systems. In that instant, across the Terran fleet and its scattered planetary defense networks, a dormant nanovirus awoke. The virus had been hidden within the tree's ceremonial data packet, encoded in the subroutines of the peace accord itself. It was brilliant in its subtlety, disguised as a harmless software update, buried under layers of encryption, activated only when the final signature was verified and broadcast back to the Federation's secure channels. The effects were immediate. On the Terran dreadnought Resolute, Admiral Ngoma was raising a glass in the officer's wardroom when the ship's lights flickered. Bridge consoles shut down, weapons arrays froze, targeting computers spun into error states. Across the fleet, communications stuttered, then died. Fighter squadrons lost navigation. Life support systems flickered with red warnings, and automated turrets spun uselessly. Panic rippled through command. On Mars, the planetary defense grid blinked out, its surface-to-orbit batteries dead silent. On Earth, military AI networks seized up, locking their operators out and refusing all manual override commands. For a moment, the Terran Federation was utterly defenseless. On the Echelon, the Xyler speaker's cool voice carried through the shimmering halls. Regrettable, it intoned, as crystalline guards materialized. Weapons formed from fractal blades of living matter, but necessary. Aboard the ship, Captain Voss's vigilance kit buzzed silently on her wrist, displaying a stream of red alerts. Her instinct screamed. She gave the prearranged signal, a slight movement of her left hand, indistinguishable from a nervous tic. The other members of the delegation snapped into action. In one smooth motion, what appeared to be ceremonial, metals transformed magnetic catches snapped open, revealing palm-sized EMP disruptors. Within seconds, the Terran delegation's personal devices flooded the immediate area with electronic noise, severing the ship's local connection to the wider Xyler network. The Xyler guards advanced, their crystalline forms refracting the ambient light into dazzling, deadly halos. Voss's team moved as 1 year of covert training and trust paying off. Diplomatic cases revealed concealed sidearms and kinetic shot batons. A hail of fractal projectiles smashed into the marble floor, narrowly missing the fleeing diplomats. Voss herself tackled the nearest Xyler, a swirl of glimmering blades, and drove her disruptor into its torso. There was a flash, a burst of sound, and the alien crumpled, its crystalline core shattering. In the chaos, Lieutenant Diego Hera, Voss's second-in-command, hacked into the ship's security systems using a device cobbled together from his vigilance kit and a discarded Xyler datapad. With a grunt of satisfaction, he seized control of the internal comms. All Terran personnel, activate offline protocols. All diplomatic staff rendezvous at Shuttle Bay Bravo. Move elsewhere on the Echelon. Hidden Terran Marines, planted as part of the security entourage, sprang from their cover. Small, intense skirmishes erupted through the alien corridors. The Marines' analog weapons, solid slug rifles, and EMP grenades were immune to the nanovirus and devastating against the Xylers' digital infrastructure. Meanwhile, on Mars, General Shu Lin, acting commander of the colony's defenses, did not hesitate. The dead man's switch, an old-fashioned mechanical override, was engaged. Automated systems were bypassed. Reserve militias were summoned using hardwired radio signals, a failsafe designed for just this scenario. All across the Terran colonies, similar protocols unfolded: old gear, analog controls, emergency bunkers dusted off and reactivated. The Xyler had calculated for a swift, surgical cookrush Terran resistance in a single moment of vulnerability, then dictate terms from a position of strength. But they had underestimated humanity's paranoia, its long memory, and its knack for stubborn, improvisational survival. Back aboard the Echelon, Captain Voss and her team fought their way through the maze of corridors toward the ship's mainframe chamber. Their objective: disable the ship's network node, preventing the virus from spreading further, or transmitting real-time data on Federation countermeasures. Each step was a battle. The Xyler fought with ruthless precision, their crystalline forms splitting and reforming, blades growing from their arms and light-bending fields rendering them half-invisible. But the Terrans fought harder, using every dirty trick they'd ever learned in a century of interstellar war. Voss lost 2 Marines in the push to the mainframe, but they made it battered, bleeding, but alive. Hera jury-rigged to bypass his, fingers flying over the alien console as alarms blared around them. The Xyler speaker's voice, still eerily calm, echoed through the chamber. "You cannot win. Humanity's time is over. Stand down, and you may be spared." Voss spat blood on the shining floor. "We never go down easy." With a final surge, Hera executed the override. The mainframe's core melted down in a controlled detonation, severing the Echelon from the rest of the Xyler fleet. The nanovirus, deprived of its command link, stalled. Across the Federation, battered systems began to recover. Command restored by human hands and analog willpower. In orbit above Cygnus V, the Terran ship, crippled but stubbornly afloat, regained just enough control to fire thrusters and reposition. Old codes, passed from captain to captain in secret for decades, flashed through the fleet. "The trap has sprung. Activate contingency." In the silence that followed, the galaxy held its breath. The Terran delegation, battered but defiant, regrouped in the ruined banquet hall. Captain Voss glanced at her surviving team, then activated her comms. "To all Federation forces, we are not defeated. Prepare for counterattack. Humanity stands armed. We always have." Far above, the first stars of counteroffensive fleets flickered into position. Vessels built in secrecy, crews drilled for the nightmare scenario no one wanted to believe. The peace treaty was a trap, but humanity had come armed, and the war for survival had only just begun. The battle for the starst moment. The Terran counterattack signal blazed across hidden channels. The galaxy changed. On the black edge of Cygnus V, above the racked and battered Xyler flagship, the true strength of human contingency unfurled. Like wings, in the darkness, ships that were never meant to exist, stealth carriers, jamming platforms. Heavy cruisers lit up their comms with the old code, contingency protocol, Valkyria. The Terran Federation's last, best hope had always been its refusal to believe in peace at face value. For every warship mothballed or stripped for treaty inspection, 2 more were built in secret, camouflaged among asteroid fields or buried in the storms of Saturn and Uranus. For every line of military AI code that had been replaced, an analog system was kept in the shadows, powered by human intuition and stubbornness. In the first hour after the trap sprang, chaos reigned. Across every colony, every fleet, every backwater outpost, old officers barked orders. Musty command bunkers flickered to life, and ancient relics of war manual switches corded comms. Kinetic railguns were dusted off. Panic gave way to grim, methodical resolve. The skirmish on the Echelon. In the Echelon, the human delegation was surrounded. The corridors pulsed with alarm light, and the hum of approaching Xyler enforcers, their crystalline bodies refracting color in alien patterns. Captain Mira Voss led the battered survivors toward the hangar bays, the route choked with debris, and the bodies of the fallen. The Xyler speaker's voice calm, echoing with mechanical grace, followed them through every ship system. There is still time to surrender. Lay down your arms and you will be integrated peacefully. Your resistance is irrational, Voss gritted her teeth. It's not irrational to fight for survival. The Marines' old-fashioned slutrowers boomed in the close confines, splintering Xyler bodies into clouds of glittering fragments. The aliens adapted, shifting form, but the Terrans adapted faster, improvising, using EMP grenades to short-circuit the ship's power, rigging bulkheads to explode and block pursuit. Lieutenant Hera hacked local access, opening airlocks and rerouting gravity fields to disorient the enemy. Voss led her people, step by brutal step, to Shuttle Bay Bravo, where a battered Terran shuttle still waited, covered in ceremonial banners that now flapped in the wind of emergency fans. "Everyone in," Voss shouted. "We launch on my mark." The hatch hissed shut as the first Xyler lances pierced the corridor, slicing into metal. Hera jammed the controls and triggered launch. The shuttle screamed out of the echelon, careening into the void just as the first wave of Terran contingency ships rallied from the Cygnus asteroid belt, punched through the Xyler perimeter. Across the Federation, humanity fights back while the echelon raged with close-quarters battle. The true war erupted across the stars. On Mars, where the surface lay pitted and scarred, General Shu Lin broadcast orders over analog channels. Activate Hammerfall batteries. All militia units manual control only. Assume infiltration of AI systems. Tank crews and infantry who'd only ever practiced with ancient gear now found their lives depending on it. The Xyler's nanovirus had rendered advanced drones and defense grids inert, but the old weapons cannons, missile silos, flamethrowers roared to life. Across the Vales Marineris, Martian volunteers ambushed Xyler incursion teams with handmade explosives and sniper rifles dating back a century. On the moons of Saturn, under the neon glow of the auroras, miners turned soldiers held the line with ice gutters, jury-rigged plasma torches, and railguns welded from industrial equipment. Civilians in the floating cities of Venus, once assured the war would never reach them, now scrambled to assemble barricades and salvage any weaponry that didn't require an AI to operate. The counteroffensive in space above Cygnus V, the human fleet surged, with main computers crippled by the nanovirus. Battles were fought by hand and by instinct. Veteran pilots, relying on old-fashioned reflexes, flew by sight and gut, calling out maneuvers over analog comms. Fighters tumbled and spun, evading crystalline Xyler drones in dogfights more reminiscent of Earth's First World War than the digital precision of modern combat. The Xyler expected chaos and confusion but found instead a species whose greatest weapon was desperation. Federation warships used their own damaged hulls as battering rams, crashed through blockades, and delivered boarding teams directly into the heart of Xyler carriers. Aboard the Resolute, Admiral Ngoma coordinated the fleet's battered remnants, using nothing but handwritten orders delivered by runners and flashing signal lamps. "We may not have our machines," she told her bridge crew, "but we have our hearts and our hate. Make every shot count." The tide began to turn. Humanity's secret weapons from hidden vaults on Earth and Luna, the Federation's black projects, finally saw the light. Doomsday ships, their existence denied for decades, emerged from asteroid caverns massive, shielded against EMP and viral attack. Bristling with weapons only humans were desperate enough to build. There were analog drones, controlled by wires and levers, resistant to Xyler sabotage. There were plasma bombs that required a human fingerprint, not a network key. There were even warwalkers hulking mechs operated by human pilots, their only computers sealed in Faraday cages. All across the stars, the Xyler found themselves facing the unthinkable, a foe that thrived on uncertainty, that adapted to every new weapon with brute ingenuity, that refused to accept defeat even when logic said the battle was lost. The push to the Xyler homeworld as the counteroffensive took shape. Federation Command recognized the truth. There could be no more half measures, no more treaties. Either the Xylar were broken, or humanity was doomed to extinction. Captain Voss, having made orbit in her battered shuttle, linked up with a Terran assault frigate. She delivered a simple message to the fleet: we take the fight to them, too. The Xylar homeworld. Admiral Ngoma ordered all surviving ships to converge. The battered Terran armada formed up, weapons primed, analog systems humming. The final battle loomed. For the first time in living memory, it was not humanity on the defensive, but humanity wounded, angry, unbroken, surging forward, intent on bringing the war home to its betrayers. The end of Eleusiansis. The Terran fleet prepared to jump. Captain Voss stared out the viewport at the scattered stars. She remembered the night before the treaty, when peace had seemed possible, when she dared to imagine a life beyond constant vigilance. Now, with every system on high alert, her hope had hardened into something sharper. You wanted to see humanity disarmed, she said to no one in particular, thinking of the Xylar speaker's cold logic. But you forgot, we never stop fighting. With that, she gave the order. Engines burned, weapons powered up, and the battered ships of the Terran Federation leapt toward the Xylar homeworld. The battle for the stars had truly begun. A new dawn or endless war. The final phase of the war would be written and rewritten 1,000 times in Terran history texts. Some would call it a victory, others a tragedy. But in those tense weeks, as the battered Terran fleet thundered toward the heart of the Xylar collective, the line between the two blurred to the point of erasure. The assault on Xylar Primede's Xylar homeworld, called Xylothra by its people, orbited a white sun amidst a field of shattered moons, once a cradle of civilization, now a fortress. Its planetary shield shimmered like a silver storm, layered with quantum fields and particle barriers. Towers of living crystal rose from the continents, their light visible from orbit. For centuries, Terran intelligence had speculated on the strength of Xylar defenses. They had not imagined the full scope: flotillas of sentient warships, squadrons of autonomous drones, defense satellites so ancient they predated the Federation itself. But the Terran fleet had not come for a siege. They had come for a reckoning. Admiral Ngoma and Captain Voss, now at the tip of the spear, coordinated a feint from the fleet's battered left wing, drawing Xylar defenders away from the northern pole. In their wake, a squadron of analog-piloted assault shuttles dove through the upper atmosphere, riding the wake of electromagnetic interference to slip past the outermost shields. As Voss's team breached the surface, they were met with utter alien beauty and ferocity. The air shimmered with charged particles, and the very ground seemed to pulse with crystalline veins. Xylar defenders emerged from the earth itself, their forms refracting into 1,000 facets of shifting geometry. Every step forward was a battle, every victory bought with blood and grit. But the Terrans pressed on, determined to reach the core spire, the seat of Xylar intelligence and the heart of the network that had nearly brought humanity to its knees. Negotiation at the edge of annihilation as the Terran Marines fought their way toward the core spire. The fleet above raged with destruction. Analog war walkers strode across the crystalline plains. Plasma bombs thundered in the depths of the cities, and the once beautiful skylines of Xylothra crumbled under the onslaught. Yet, in orbit, an unthinkable communication broke through. The Xylar speaker, Zatril, offered a signal of surrender. Voss, battered and bloodied, received the transmission from a crystal-walled chamber near the core. Zatril's voice was distorted, haunted by something like regret. You fight with ferocity, unanticipated. Your species persists where logic failed. We would have learned from you shared existence, but your pain was too great. You could not trust us, and we could not understand why. For a moment, the weight of centuries pressed on both sides. There was an offer, a ceasefire, immediate and unconditional. The Xylar would stand down, their network would be purged of hostile code, and reparations would be offered. But the Terran Marines, fresh from battle, comrades dead at their feet, clamored for vengeance. We came all this way to end it, one shouted. Why trust them now? Voss faced the speaker. Weapons still trained. You lied. You almost destroyed us. Why should we believe you? Zatril's crystalline form flickered, the light within dimming. Because if you do not, this planet dies. We die, and you will become what you fear most. The threat hung in the air, a planet-wide detonation, a final act of self-destruct. But in Zatril's eyes, Voss saw no malice, only exhaustion. The cost of endless war had become clear, even to the architects of the trap peace. But at a price, of standoff in the core spire was watched across to civilizations. The battered Terran fleet braced for orbital retaliation, fingers hovering over doomsday switches. The Xyler, their confidence shattered, waited for either salvation or the end. At the last moment, Voss made the call. No more death, she said, lowering her weapon. We accept your surrender on our terms. A new treaty was drafted, not as a digital transmission, but by hand, with ink on composite paper, witnessed by all who survived the carnage. The terms were harsh but just: complete demilitarization of the Xyler fleet, full reparations to Terran worlds, and the permanent shutdown of the Xyler's offensive networks. Joint teams would oversee the process, analog only, with all systems open to inspection. The reckoning when the word reached Earth and the colonies. The reaction was mixed. Some celebrated the end of the war, parading in ruined streets and holding each other as if waking from a nightmare. Others mourned, knowing victory had come at a cost beyond measure. Entire cities lost, cultures shattered, a future forever changed by fear and violence. The Terran Federation's leaders, forever changed by the betrayal, declared that peace would never again be taken at face value. The vigilance kits remained standard issue. The analog protocols, once seen as paranoid relics, became the backbone of human security. Captain Voss, haunted by the faces of those she'd lost and those she'd spared, returned to a world both grateful and uneasy. She was hailed as a hero, then questioned in hearings that dragged on for months. In time, she faded from the public eye, content to watch from afar as a new era struggled to take shape. An uneasy future. In the years that followed, the galaxy settled into an uneasy calm. Terrans and Xyler rebuilt, side by side, always watching for signs of treachery, always wary of old wounds reopening. Trust would be measured in generations, not years. And yet, in that fragile silence, something new took root. Not the easy peace of treaties, but the hard-won understanding of two species that had gazed into the abyss and refused to fall. On the day of the final withdrawal, as the last Terran ships left Xylothra's orbit, Captain Voss looked back at the planet, now half ruined and half renewed, and whispered a vow. We will remember, we will be ready, but maybe, just maybe this time, peace will hold. In the void between the stars, the promise of war still lingered, but for the first time in living memory, there was also the faint, stubborn hope of a new dawn.